example of archaeological analysis of discursive regularities on school evaluation in Europe. Again, as a starting point, this is an analysis which is which cross, which suspend these kind of unities. There is no policy, scientific knowledge, and educational practice as separated domains. You have policy idea, recipes, and reforms. There are processes of mutual implication constitution with bodies of evaluated knowledge, fields of theoretical and empirical investigation, and this is both, and all of them are related to what happens, in what we call the context of educational practices, which means our daily experience of education, our engagement with the educational evaluation, and what happens in educational administration and at the level of policymaking and so on. What I've done, I'm trying to write a book on this. I don't know if this will ever see the light in the end. But for instance, what I'm doing in the attempt to analyze educational evaluation as a discursive field is try to focus on what at first glance appear as immediate recurrences. I think that it is grasping, models, tables, policy texts and documents, tools and techniques which are employed, in educational evaluation at all the different levels that I referred at the beginning. It is possible to identify some immediate recurrences, and I provide you here some example. I think that in your experience as a researcher, as a teacher, as a student, you have often seen models or graphic visualization, or you have find linguistic performance like the one I have pictured here. What I've done is, try to analyze these recurrences in order to depict trees of derivations, and so searching for governing statements. Have a look at this. Probably some of you know what is this. This is from the 2013 OECD report, which is called Better Synergies of Learning for Learning. And this is a quite strange, document, but very influential, where the OECD launched a sort of empirical analysis of which were the trends in terms of educational evaluation in the OECD countries, and they established national teams which were asked to make report, on the contemporary trends in educational evaluation. All of that was, of course, governed at the OECD level by people coming from economics of education and the world of advisory and consultants. But at the local level, national teams were made of people coming from different disciplinary fields and tradition. And the OECD report basically makes a paradoxical operation, because on the one hand, the document says this is the description of what is going on, in the OECD countries, and at the same time there is a shift, continuous shift in the argument towards a sort of normative position, which this is the trend, this is the direction where we all should point to, and the direction is the construction of what is called an overall evaluation and assessment framework. And this is the picture which, to a certain extent, summarizes the vision which is endorsed in the report, in the OECD report. Now, of course, we could analyze this kind of pictures in many different ways. What does it mean according to my reading, to look at this as a possible statement. For instance, do you think that it is possible to recognize a statement here in the terms that I have talked about? According to me, here it is possible to identify how we have a process of object formation here. There is the formation of a set, an ensemble of objects of discourse, of educational evaluation, is a discursive formation, through, the operation of what Foucault calls a grid of specification. What I mean, if you look at the way the figure is portrayed here, it is possible to clearly identify how the objects that emerge here are organized according to a specific grid. And the grid is the grid of the system, intended as a multidimensional volume of units, organs, linked together by networks of dependence and communication. Just have a look at these forms of visualizing, what are the objects of educational evaluation through, these forms of conceptualization. You have the system, the school, the classroom, the practice. You have the student, which are organized as something which belongs to a unity, which has an external and an internal, isn't it? And they are concentric. They are related by forms of communication and dependence, which are very complex. The lines linking all the elements. This volume is made of units, can be segmented, described, classified in terms of concentric units. There is a hierarchy between them. This volume has a goal, objective, which are to a certain extent external and internal. They are in the middle. This volume do a work, do something, and it produces an outcome, which is here is defined in terms of students' outcome. But the problem is, look at the kind of relation which are established here, and how these relations, this rule or rules of relating produce the objects in a certain way, the object of the educational evaluation. What it is that we have to evaluate when we think about educational evaluation. You see,
education system,
yeah,
based on the statement of Foucault.
Of
Foucault, yeah, the statement.
Here, I mean,
from Foucault.
This is a way to analyze this one. This that is a material form of thought,
Sí.
According to the archaeological perspective,
Sí.
which means the attempt is to identify what statement, what enunciative function, what way of relating objects, concepts, and enunciative modalities, which is subject position, emerge from. It is possible, not emerge. It is possible to recognize here, because the problem is the modality of existence. It is a mode of existence. I will just show you this, in order to clarify what kind of point I'm making here. If you, I've tried starting from that statement to construct, a complex tree of derivation. It is impossible to present it in its complexity at the moment here. But I want to show you a section, a small figure, in order to make clear which point I'm trying to make. in that kind of regularity, the kind of regularity is possible to identify in that statement relates to the fact that in that case, educational systems, educational, the school, the classrooms, teachers and students emerge as objects and subjects of educational evaluation according to the transposition, in the enunciative field of educational evaluation of a grid of specification which comes basically from biology. Because what we have there, it is, a kind of production of the objects of educational evaluation system, school as organization, classroom as a group or as a system of relation, the student, the teacher, the teacher. We can go on, the researcher at in the university, according to something which are parts, units, organ of a system, which is a one-volume system, which has an outside, an external side, which has a goal. And basically, if we come back at the picture, it is also clear how this volume, which is made of, which can be known through a set of operation of sectionalizing. You can section the volume in different units, which are the organs. All this volume as a sort of plan, because he has to fulfill a function. This is quite clearly a sort of transposition of a grid specification which has developed in the field of biology to the enunciative field of educational evaluation. And just try to follow the tree of derivation in order to see how some modes of intervening which are distinctive of educational evaluation find their condition of existence exactly in the transposition of this kind of grid specification. Because, of course, we talk a lot about indicators and the role of indicators and the role of data and the role of comparison and so on. But what made, to a certain extent, difficult to contest about the use of indicators is exactly the fact that if we think about the educational system and it's in terms of organ units which are related together because they exert a function, and basically the function can be known on the basis of the grasping of the effects, because the function is something which is hidden in the organization. It is not immediately visible. Of course, if the task becomes to relate the visible to the invisible, in order to understand if the living system and its organ are fulfilling the function that can be known in terms of effect, so indicators become to a certain extent, the way to know, to grasp the effects, and so to understand if the system is able to fulfill the function. And of course, if I think of the educational domains in terms of a living system made of organs, it became possible to think about the analysis of educational systems and the evaluation of educational systems in terms of anatomic disarticulation. I disarticulate the system in terms of units organ. I focus on the organs, whatever the level is, whatever the level of specificity or the scale of generality I adopt. And this makes possible to think about comparison and ordering along scales on the basis of the capacity of the system to fulfill a function, to respond to a plan, which I can know by relating the visible to the invisible using indicators. you know. And at the same time, the logical comparison and the ordering along scales, you know, the rankings, it makes possible because systems as volume, as living systems, have an internal and external. So they have condition of existence. That is something which externally influence, because set goals to a certain extent, and also influence the functioning, you know, the operation of the organization of the system. Look, tradition, cultures, values, and education policies. These are all elements, you know, which insist from the external of the system and influence the working, the functioning, and so on. And so, living system as having an internal organization have external condition of existence, an environment, and of course within an environment they have an historicity which is evolutionary, because it relates to the continuous adaptability to the environment and the capacity of the living system to fulfill properly with increasing effectiveness the function, you know, responding to the sovereignty of a plan. You know, you can relate much of the traits of educational evaluation, you know, the imperatives of evaluation, the imperative of improvement, the way we look at the educational system, educational organization, educational subjects through the lenses of evaluation, through this conceptual transposition. What I'm trying, for instance, to relate in terms of derivation, governing statements like the one I have showed you, with other statements, for instance, related to school autonomy and accountability, and the way, you know, in that kind of statement, it is possible to recognize the attempt to establish an anatomy of the educational system and their organs. If you have a look at this kind of statements, you can clearly see that, you know, there is a derivation between the transposition of the idea of the living system in order to define the objects, and the kind of intervention it is possible to operate on that objects through, for instance, accountability in terms of anatomy of the organs of a system. And again, this one was from the World Bank. This is from the UNESCO, and again, you see, I don't have the time to go into details, but you see analysis, diagnosis, and again a way of, you know, representing a volume, a unit made of concentric section, and also if you come back to this. Here, I say at the beginning that this is a very complex statement, or maybe it is possible to recognize a relation between statements here. I think that here you can see how, you know, the transposition of the biological grid of specification of the living system coexist, is in a correlation with another kind of grid of specification, which basically pertain to the role that governance, design, implementation, capacity building, and bureaus of results have as a procedure of intervention on, you know, the educational systems as object of educational evaluation. What I mean is that we increasingly, for instance, we can find statement which has which in terms of modality of existence can be related to the transposition of another fundamental figure coming in this case from economy, which is the figure of production, you know. this is the CIPP evaluation model, which again is at the basis of most of the self-evaluation the technologies used in the OECD countries. And here you can, again clearly recognize what, together with the transposition of the grid of specification of living system from biology, the establishment of a connection to economics as a field of concomitance, a collateral space of conceptualization, where production acts as another specific grid of specification. And here production, of course, is if you look at the figure, is framed in terms of something which develop through labor, and labor is conceptualized as it is in the foundations of economy. I think about Ricardo at that time as energy and as activity, So there is the energy, toil, and time of people who work, and who spend their energy, and labor is an activity. And while the idea that there are economic agents that invest their energy in a sort of process of production, open the possibility to think of a market where there is a relation between a contractual relation between someone who commit the production and someone who invests energy and toil. At the same time, the idea that production developed to labor as activity is what allow to define the value of things in terms of the product of a specific form of production. Now again, if you take the example of the self-evaluation report I gave you before, it is again possible to see what is the concomitance between this kind of grid of specification and how we think about the evaluation of education systems, of schools as organization, of teachers as professional, and so on. Evaluation tool and techniques constantly look at the labor of the educational labor as energy, toil, time, desire, which is invested by educational subjects, and as an activity, And and of course, what the conceptualization of the educational process in terms of a form of production is what makes possible to think procedural intervention on the laws, the time, and the necessities of production, and frame the issue of effectiveness in this term. And improvement basically means, for instance, in a statement like this, to look at a process of production in terms of indicators, again, something which make visible the value of the effect produced by a form of production, and to know this, develop learning in order to improve. There is the art of make quite clear what is the role and how data monitoring tools, learning are related here in a specific set of relations, which can be again related to the figure of production. Another last point about my example of how I'm trying to apply archaeology, both in terms of the transposition of the living system as a grid of specification, and the transposition of the figure of production, as ways to form the objects of the educational evaluation and outline the kind of procedure of intervention that is possible to operate on educational evaluation. These two processes of transpositions can be related to other two distinct features of this field of concomitance. If you think at the idea of the living system, or you think at the idea of at the figure of production, they are both related to a form of finitude, which I means, in the case of the living system is something which is in a relation to its environment because it's facing continuously the threat of death. You know? And if we come to the economics, in the field of economics, you know, the idea is that forms of production have to be worked on in order to become more effective, facing a situation of scarcity. My point, I'm not able to show it how empirically I have come to this point, but I would like to make here a connection. In the field of evaluation, educational evaluation, these two ideas, the facing to death and the facing to scarcity, have to a certain extent produced the idea of the fallibility, you know, of the education as a form of production, and fallibility as, you know, something which educational system as living system have to deal with and have to face with, you know.